Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, are the Red Raiders set to face the best QB they've seen so far this season? And we get into a State of the Legs address next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started with the only Chris level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Not too long now before you'll be shipping on up to Ames, Iowa for Red Raiders and Cyclones. We're taking a closer look at that matchup here today and want to get into a couple of different things on a Texas Tech front. One, we will revisit the kicking conversation from last weekend and basically deliver a state of the legs address, I guess is what I would say, as we head into the next ball game. And also want to get into some of what Texas Tech will be facing as far as the opposition for Iowa State. I know we talked a lot on yesterday's episode about what the Cyclones do defensively, but as I mentioned yesterday, I wanted to get into what we're going to see from ISU offensively, which could include one of the most under-discussed quarterbacks in the country, and I'm curious how you feel about this. Possibly the best QB that Tech's seen so far this season as far as individual play is concerned, and we'll get to maybe what the Red Raiders will do to attack that. But first, let's take a listen to Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell talking about his QB, Rocco Becht.
Number one, I would say the quarterback position is so hard to play, and I don't care what level it is. But I think as you grow into, Power 4 football where people are writing about it and, everybody has a comment about the sport to professionally, that position is so much more mental than it is even physical. And I think one of the things that you did identify early with Rocco is who he was as a human being, as a young man. And I think if you said what were, Brock's great traits, I think remember talking about this a lot with Brock is Brock was never trying to be anybody else. He didn't come in here and try to be like, his hero is Dan Marino. It wasn't like, I want to be like Dan Marino. Like he was always just trying to be the best version of Brock that he could be. And I think the thing that's been really fun about Rocco is really he's been that same guy every day that he's been in our football program. He's never come in and said, man, I want to be like Brock Purdy, or I want to be like, player X, Y, or Z, or man, I want to be like my dad. I just want to be the best I possibly can be. And I think when you do that and you have that kind of character and humility, what happens is people are drawn to you. And I think that's the one thing that certainly Brock had the unique ability to do, and certainly what Rocco is doing right now.
One of the more interesting stories in the Big 12 from a year ago, him taking this opportunity and running with it. And I'm curious, what do you think about the thought of him maybe being the best QB Tech's faced so far this season?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't. His numbers aren't just overwhelming. His measurables. He's not like some big guy, or he's not. I mean, he's 6'1", a little over 200 pounds. He's not going to just crush you with his legs or his arm strength, but I think he's playing with a lot of confidence. He's just got a lot of moxie, and you hear the comparison right there by one of the previous Iowa State greats in Brock Purdy that kind of put Matt Campbell's program on the map to a certain extent, who's playing for the 49ers now. Also a guy that didn't overwhelm you with size or arm strength, but just make the plays. And I think this is a kid that's playing with a lot of confidence right now. And he's got enough around him because they've got two wideouts around them that he's throwing to that have combined for, I want to say, like 82 catches. These are NFL guys. These are going to look very similar to what you saw last week. These are going to look very similar to what you have playing for you. They are measurables guys. They're very productive. I mean, Jaden Higgins, 45 catches. Jalen Noel, 37 catches. They're both hovering around 600 yards or slightly over it. They've got 9 touchdowns combined amongst them, and then it's running back by committee. So I think that Rocco Becht it's very balanced, where he because where this kid, I think maybe he's playing with a lot of confidence and he plays to his defense. I don't think he tries to do too much, but his numbers, generally speaking, were slightly better last year. But the most impressive thing you can say about Rocco Becht right now is his team's undefeated, and that's a direct reflection to him and the way he's kind of managing things and the way he's playing and all those things. And he makes key plays in tight games when it matters. And I think that's kind of why that question was asked to Matt Campbell about where the comparisons are drawn. But this is just it's a true sophomore, I believe. I think he's started this 20 career games, so he's got plenty of experience under his belt now all of a sudden. And he may be playing with the most confidence of anybody you've seen. Like, I'm trying to think. I don't think he's better than the kid that you're going to face next weekend in Lubbock, in Shedeur Sanders. I don't.
Hey, don't spoil it. I wanted to trot this question out again next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Weeks in a row.
But he's probably playing with and he's not asked to carry it all. He's not having to go out there and win it and be the whole thing. And so I think because he's got people around him, he's also got an exceptional defense, and I think that goes a long way. But he's playing within himself. But the scary part is if you get into a close one, he's just somebody you don't want to give a chance to, because he's been making and the last game out for these guys, I think he had close to 100 yards rushing, which is by far the most he'd had all season against Central Florida, and essentially won the game at the end with a rushing touchdown, which was his second of the game. So
yeah, I think you described him just about perfectly in that he's got like some clutch DNA to him. He'll make big plays in big moments, and otherwise, not that he's not capable, but it's not like he's prolific statistically, but he's not in the way of his team's success. I think he was like 23-8 TD to interception a year ago, 11-5, I believe, so far this season. So he's not really making a ton of mistakes. One thing I'll get to in just a moment was, along with that season high in rushing yardage that we saw last time out against Central Florida, it was also a season high as it relates to mistakes with a couple of picks thrown. I want to talk about these PO'd Cyclones coming off of arguably their worst performance of the season last time around in just a bit. But I'm kind of wondering, if you feel like you have a quarterback like Becht, and maybe you apply this to some other weeks gone by, I'm kind of wondering what you expect out of the approach defensively for Texas Tech whenever it comes to trying to concoct some ways to pressure this guy. And I think it's kind of a perfect time with it being Halloween week. So I'm just thinking about Tim DeRuyter being over like a boiling cauldron, just coming up with some type of potion, trying to figure out how the heck to pressure guys, because we know you can't just straight up do it, with 4 D linemen or whatever it might be. You got to get a little bit creative. But, Chris, I can't imagine it's just as easy as like flipping the switch, but it almost sort of looked like that the last couple of weeks. And even going back to the Arizona game where you're able to do that, then you're absolutely unable to do it against Baylor. It didn't look like you were throwing as much at Sawyer Robertson, and he made you pay for that. And then I almost felt like you were throwing a little bit more last time out in Fort Worth. I'm sorry. I know it's not that simple, but what do you think about that ebb and flow the last few weeks, and maybe what would you project as far as how they try to attack Becht in the Iowa State offense? First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching the game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. What do you think about that ebb and flow the last few weeks, and maybe what would you project as far as how they try to attack Becht in the Iowa State offense?
You know, the best comparison maybe I can come up with, and I've heard of a few people, so this isn't original, but the best comparison I can give you on him, maybe somebody that you have seen, is Bo Nix from last year, that quarterbacked Oregon. Also, not a guy that was just wowing anybody with his size or anything that he did, but he just kind of made the right play all the time and used what he had around him at his disposal. And as you know, we saw last year in Oregon, they had plenty around him. This is a guy that you just Tim's gonna do what he does, and they're gonna try to mix it up. They're gonna try to pressure some. They're gonna try to play coverage some. So much of, honestly, there is an unknown here too. What's the weather doing?
True.
And it looks like that, and it's probably going to change 2 or 3 times, but it looks like that the rain will come later in the day. I think they're calling for late afternoon. So you may start this game with no problems at all, but then the game could theoretically change because I think the last time I saw it's like, well, the rain chances are all start and increase dramatically around 4 p.m. that day. Well, you could be late second quarter or halftime or into the second half before you get that aspect of this, if it holds. But that's where that would change dramatically on what you try to do and how nasty is it with the weather and the ball slippery and all that stuff. But at face value, like with all things being equal, I think that you have to mix it up. He's not necessarily going to. He might be good enough to just beat you running it if you dared him to and said, "Man, we're not gonna worry about that. We're gonna worry about these stud wideouts, and we're gonna worry about this running back by committee and all these tight ends that Iowa State seems to find." And if he wants to, because he ran it for 20 times versus UCF, but at the end of the day, he was good enough to beat him with his legs, like literally. So. It's a good question. I think that you just have to be disciplined because this is one of these guys where you can't overrush, but you also can't, if he looks up and he starts to see in the back of everybody's jersey on defense, I mean, he's going to tuck it and go. I mean, and punish you, especially so if it is a weather issue, because that makes it even more difficult because he knows where he's going and you don't know where he's going, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think you have to mix it up, and that's maybe where Tech has struggled some this year with trying to get in some of these looks. Now that probably got him an interception last week with CJ Baskerville. I think you kind of changed the picture pre-snap versus post-snap, and he took the bait and he threw it right to you. Now it was a heck of a leap by Baskerville, but that probably got you one there. So you need to continue to do that. Just very similar to what Iowa State does to you on defense.
Yeah, no doubt. And man, as a team, thinking about their last time out and some extra time to get over that, correct some things, prepare for Texas Tech. I'm looking at Iowa State against Central Florida and thinking this is their worst showing of the year, arguably. And Central Florida has a lot to do with that. I'm not trying to just say, boy, Iowa State, was stumbling and bumbling around, and they still win the game. So who cares at the end of the day? But when you're looking at what they had done up to that point, I do kind of think like, all right, there was, one of those games where great teams will have to win a week really ugly, or when things are not going necessarily the way that they want them to do. And they were still doing a lot of great things, obviously defensively as far as takeaways and things like that. But they were hammered on the ground as far as the opposing rushing attack was concerned. I mentioned a couple of interceptions that were thrown by the Iowa State offense. I mean, you expect a well-coached team, which is what I view Iowa State as under Matt Campbell, to really come out PO'd for greatness, if you will. So I'm wondering what type of Cyclones motivation we may be in for on Saturday.
I think I'm going to attack that a bit different. I don't know if this is a team that can turn it on and turn it off kind of thing. Like if you go screw a bunch of stuff up, they are absolutely going to hand it to you. If you play poorly and you do a lot of things to aid them in this. I do wonder, though, I'll counter what you said because I think it's a very fair point. One, they're coming off their second bye week. So they've already had their 2 bye weeks. Probably going to be extremely healthy and rested. Sluggish? I don't know. Here's what is interesting. How much of this? Because if they were to beat you on Saturday, they move to 8-0 for the first time in their entire football program's history. And I think that you just wonder how much of, and maybe you're catching them a bit earlier before they feel a lot of pressure. I just remember several years ago, and you may remember this. Remember when Oklahoma State showed up to Ames on a Friday night, I guess it was, and Oklahoma State was the one that was undefeated, and Iowa State's the one that pulled off the upset and kind of wrecked it for Oklahoma State. Maybe you're catching them before they really start to feel a lot of this, but that's all the talk has been in Ames, man. Like, this is historic. We are on the cusp. It's set up for us. We just got to get to that Kansas State game at the end when you know somebody's going to take a win or a loss. But their schedule is very manageable on paper up until that point. And maybe you are catching them at the right time. Sometimes it's not where you play people, it's when you play them. And you may find out that like you said, you may find out that you're playing, this was the wrong time to play these guys. But maybe it's also the perfect time.
I like your frame of mind better.
Yeah,
I like that. Well, and I think it was a fair point that you made yesterday. And no disrespect to Iowa State, I'm certainly impressed with what they've done so far this season. But when you look back at the schedule, it may be Iowa that's the high water mark as far as competition. You go on the road, you beat West Virginia by 2 scores. I mean, the road aspect probably adds something to that as far as the resume, but it's not exactly like they've run the gauntlet of the best of the Big 12 so far. I'm not saying Tech's going to represent that, obviously, but I thought it was fair to point that out yesterday.
If you are doing a what a lot of people do, like a power ranking, I would clearly have BYU 1. Not when I say clearly, but they would be 1 over Iowa State based on. I mean, BYU's beaten SMU, very impressive win all of a sudden, and that was on the road. BYU's also hammered Kansas State, which is another one of these contenders. Iowa State doesn't really have anything like that on their resume. They can't control it, but what Iowa State has been they're going to be very good, and they're very crisp. It's going to be very similar to like what a Kansas State, that typical, we don't beat ourselves. We're not going to be heavily penalized. We're unlikely to turn it over. We may get you on special teams on a play. This is kind of their formula, and whenever it gets rolling. But the best thing I can say about them is they are very comfortable in their own skin. They are not trying to be this or that. They are just they're comfortable being boring. They're comfortable just like barely beating you. They're comfortable playing their style and making you adapt to it. Those are positive because all they've done is just win. And I would take it in a heartbeat and let people go, yeah, you hadn't really beat anybody that impressive. Sign me up for that.
Problem with
it. But when you do look at it, but it is impressive to go in some ways to go to West Virginia and win it when everybody was kind of leaning on Neal and like going, okay, this you may get West Virginia's best punch, and they just kind of leaned on them. It wasn't overwhelming. They just kind of controlled the game throughout. I think Central Florida, that's again, it's about matchups too. And Central Florida was really good with their QB run game. They felt like that's what we can do to gash these guys. And it has skewed Iowa State stats a bit from a rushing defense standpoint, just from a season overall and everything like that. And can you do anything like that? We kind of talked about that on yesterday's show. Is there anything that you can, because what does that look like? It's probably not going to be Baron Morton, maybe other than a time or two, which was just, you're trying to be tricky there. Are you comfortable enough putting a Cam Brown in there to like see what that looks like, knowing that you probably don't want him throwing the football with all that going on in the secondary and what they do? Or you comfortable using your freshman who may not want to, if all are healthy, he may not really want to waste a game here and risk, we play that dynamic out too. So that's a good question, but I wish there was like a door number 4 that you could go, well, this is the perfect solution for this.
It's not the perfect solution, but I was going to ask sort of about a door number 4. It seems like we've kind of seen, Conyers in that Wildcat kind of setting as a ball carrier sort of fade as the season has gone along. Am I just missing some snaps?
Taj too. I mean,
well, do you think there's an obvious reason for that, or
I don't know if it's a matchup, but I mean, I'd be willing to bet you that, and it's probably my fault for not bringing that up as an aside when we were talking about that on yesterday's show about if Barron were to play, that you know, and I kind of went the Cam Brown route, like, okay, would this be, because I just want to everybody to remember, I don't remember how many carries he got, but Tyler Shuck essentially won that game with a throw to Baylor Cup. Okay, that's what scored the points, but he really won that game with the QB power stuff on the last couple drives of the game, working the clock, milking it. You know, are you comfortable using Jalen Conyers like that? Probably so. And I'd be, again, my fault. I probably should have, so kudos to you for doing that. That may be a better option, and one that everybody is more comfortable with than Cam Brown at this point is the Conyers.
Well, I don't view him as dynamic or potentially big play oriented, I guess, but I don't even know if that's.
I think he is. I think he is. Yeah, I think he is. Keep in mind, this is a kid that ran this scheme a full game for Arizona State last year. They operated exclusively out of their tight end playing QB last year. So he's more than comfortable, and he can throw it, as we've seen. Just dropped the touchdown pass a couple of weeks ago, and all that. So, and I think he's comfortable doing it. So I think that's probably well said by you. And I probably would say, if I was ranking it, if Barron is going to play, and at this point, we're going to go off of what Joey has said about percentages on questionable lists a couple weeks ago. And then we get added to that, like, everybody, I feel pretty good about everybody on the questionable list. Let's just go with the assumption that that's the option that you've got. I'd be willing to bet you that I would rank Conyers as 1 and Cam Brown as 2 on options to show that to Iowa State and to potentially try to attack them. So much so that, I mean, even if you were willing to lean on it for a full drive or a full, I don't want to say major in it, but if you leaned on it quite a bit. So again, we'll kind of until they show they could stop it,
Right. I like big plays. I like 4 yards at a time as well. So whatever route gets you to something that resembles a chance to win in the fourth quarter, I'm down with. And I guess I'm just embracing the idea, as you told me to on Monday, actually, not on the air, but in a conversation we had outside of the show, that Behren Morton is actually going to be out there on Saturday. I mean, and I asked you about it on the show, like the smoke and mirrors aspect of it. You cleared out all the smoke. You broke all my mirrors. You said no very quickly. And I guess that's what we should expect at this point in time. It's not gamesmanship.
Yeah, because I think I texted you right in the middle of the press conference, and I'm like, based on what Joey is saying, I'm like, I think Behren likely playing. I think it's exactly what I sent you. Right. And I don't think it is any kind of smoke and mirror. I think they were, as Joey said, I mean, he came in, and I think he even said, I'm kind of surprised, which I would agree. I'm surprised as well. But, and then I don't remember what it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was like, what did we get? The 80% or better percentage?
He said 80% is the way he views questionable list guys.
And then he drops and he singled out Behren in this standpoint, but I feel really good about everybody on this questionable list playing on Saturday. Yeah. That includes, and he's like, and that includes Behren Morton, because I'm like, okay, so that's why I said what I said. I mean, I'm just gonna go off of that, but that's what I'm expecting. So I think it's important to note the Conyers / Cam Brown, and then also understanding what Will Hammond's wishes are versus what your wishes would be, and then the health of Morton. There's a whole kind of interesting conversation to have on trying to do right by your team, do right by players, and then putting your best foot forward. There's a lot going on there, but yeah, you've definitely got some options. But this is what got Iowa State the most, this season. Yeah. And yes, they probably have worked on it quite a bit over the last 2 weeks. It's like, okay, we little dam, little hole in the dam there. We got to plug it up. They probably have addressed that, but they may come into this going, well, if Morton's going to start or him, they're not going to major in that like UCF did, but maybe you will. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it looks a little bit different. We'll see.
Maybe it looks a little bit different. Pistol, diamond, the triple T, Tommy McVeigh Memorial formation, which I love. Power, triple power I, whatever that looked like. Let's trot it all back out in names. Before we get out of here, Chris, I feel like we do have to spend at least a moment this week in a state of the legs address, because first, today's episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Fixes tired fast. Whether you've got a long list of tasks at work or a bundle of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can cover everything with energy to spare. If you're like me, you've always got a lengthy list of things to get done around the house. So when you get your supplies for any project, don't forget the most essential one, a 5 Hour Energy shot. 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. And that's why 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy and hectic day. And you always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Even better, stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. And right now, if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions and does not apply to subscription orders. Boost your day, boost your life, and get in the get it done zone by going to 5hourenergy.com today. I feel like we do have to spend at least a moment this week in a state of the legs address, because we just missed our first field goal. Now, it was a very interesting week, obviously, for the special teams in general, given the fact that you have a kicker scoring a touchdown, who then, by the way, I just feel like we missed a huge opportunity immediately afterwards. Come back for the extra point. I'm sitting in my seat, and maybe I had a little too much Jack Daniels by that point in time, but I'm thinking, do it again. Do it. Double fake. Has anybody ever double fake 2 plays in a row to get a TD and then do it on the extra point? They were a little more conservative, which is probably the right approach in that instance. But I got to be honest, this is not to do with field goal rotation. I was a little surprised to see Burkhart make that extra point kick, so I thought he was going to be so damn wound up. Hell, he just made a political statement on national television, not to mention the TD. I thought he'd be so wound up they might pull him, and it did look like he got quite a bit into that, as it wasn't exactly right down the pipe on the extra point. Nonetheless, you then come back out, and we know, and this was within the rotation, I believe, because we'd already seen Geno on a 38-yarder there in the first quarter. So rotation suggests when you get to the 50-yarder in the second, the one that Burkhart misses, it is his time. Now, I'm still thinking at that point in time, is there any logic to how wound up this guy could be? And maybe we go back with Garcia. Also, just the difficulty in a 50-yard kick. I feel like this may just be something in my tiny brain, but I've sort of thought, okay, like clutch situations, difficulty situations, maybe we're erring towards Geno. I kind of had that vibe, but that's not what you went with. And so in general, I was kind of curious as to what you were seeing there on the sideline, maybe what you thought about how things played out. And also moving forward, since we had a miss now, does that end a rotation of some kind? Does that change anything as far as what you expect to see in the final few weeks of the season?
I think one, Geno would have kicked the game, the one at the end, had they been able to kick it. Okay, that was
been out of rotation.
Correct. Correct. It would have been that's what they were going to do. Because he was the one, and I say that because he was the one warming up and kicking into the net, and Burkhart was not. I think that the miss, what was it, 49 or 50?
I think it's 50 even. Yeah,
okay, 50 even. He's got a stronger leg, hence the reason that he's the kickoff guy. He does Reese Burkhart. And I don't think there was anything wrong with the snap or really, technically speaking. I think he just kind of pushed it to the right a bit. It was long enough. He just missed it, which is what happens sometimes. We've gotten so used to kickers, generally speaking, have been that's it's kind of like the 3-pointer in basketball. It's like the skill set there. Everybody's improved so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I've even heard talk in the NFL where they may like shrink the goalposts a little bit just because kickers are. It's like 60. Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's wild. It's kind of changed. The kickers are just really good, and a miss is like, whoa, it's more of a. There's still plenty of misses in the pros and in college, but luckily that had been your only miss to this point. But I don't know if that alters them going only to Geno. I think that if you had a 50-yarder again, I wouldn't be surprised if that was Reese, just because he's got a bit more leg than because. Like there's a kid on their campus right now named Stone Harrington, I think is his name, which will be the only kicker left on your roster after this year. And Reese and Geno exhaust their eligibility, and he's probably got the strongest leg out of all of them, all three of them. But he's kind of like Eddie Calvin LaLouche and Bull Durham. Like I don't know where it's going, man. Or like me on the tee box. Like I can hit it a mile, but I don't really know what direction it may go. But I mean, I will pop that thing. That was my favorite thing when I used to play golf. I could hit it about 325, 330 regularly, not straight, but I mean, and that's how I approached golf. It was like a long drive contest for me. When you get up to a par 3, I'm like, well, this sucks. I can't pull out the driver. Now I scored horribly. But so back on the kicker thing.
Wait, so this is a notice to the co-eds on campus. We need a Susan Sarandon out there somewhere before next year for this kicker.
There you go. I like the synergy. You brought it back to the movie reference. That's well done. With somebody that lights plenty of candles and that's kind of into breathing with your eyelids and all that kind of stuff. But I still envision a rotation. But I think that Geno's maybe more of the pressure guy. Reese is maybe strictly in rotation or the long guy. But I would even say that if it was a longer kick at the end of a game, I think that's still probably Geno Garcia to answer the question.
I really didn't think about that part of it, which is so obvious given his kickoff duties, like you said. But I didn't consider that aspect of it.
And I'm not going to be surprised. You back on something you said about Reese and the fake and everything like that. I do think. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you reach into your bag of tricks, assuming that the weather doesn't prohibit it or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because this is going to be a game that if you have a chance, you're going to have to go win it. Iowa State's not going to hand it to you. There's going to be 60 plus there, regardless of the weather. That it's going to be one of the toughest environments in the Big 12. That you play in, because they're now, especially so because they're motivated. I've been there when they're not very good, and it's still a pain in the ass to play against. It wasn't, 2 years ago, because Iowa State wasn't very good and the temperature was null, void. There was none. But this will be a one that you have to go win, and maybe you take a chance or two if you get the right look or whatever. So I'll be shocked if you don't see something. They're assuming the weather would cooperate, because you'll have to go take it. They're not going to give you anything here.
I'd have to go back and review week to week, but I don't know if we've really had a week without something pulled out of the bag in one way or another. Some different phases, obviously, but we've seen some interesting things attempted, some successful, some not so far this year. And yeah, definitely want to pack a fully loaded bag as you go to Ames on Saturday. Great stuff as always, Chris. Appreciate the time and the perspectives as always. Enjoyed it. And we'll see you back around for one mo again before we ship you to Ames, Iowa.
We will do it. And I'm getting the rain gear ready. And if you haven't ever seen Bull Durham, go watch it. It's Americana at its finest, man. It's an older film, but it's Hall of Fame worthy as far as sports flicks or just comedy in general. Has not aged or dated a bit. Go watch it. Give it a look.
The final recommendation of the episode.
Hey man, he hit the bull. It looks like he gets a free steak. I think that was the line. Yeah.
I got room for Bull Durham quotes on any episode, any time of year.
Yeah,
All right. Appreciate you guys for being out there as always. Thanks especially to those everydayers in the audience who are back with us, and we expect to see you tomorrow, maybe double time, as we got a mailbag episode to get to as well before we're out of here for the week. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode, and check out the Matador Mob Insiders. Your direct line to Chris and myself is one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. Try it on free for 14 days with a trial there. You can find the link in the show notes and check it out. Enjoyed mixing it up with you fellers and gals, a few gals in the mobster crew as well this week as we get ready for Red Raiders and Cyclones. And, of course, one of the best ways to help us grow the show, comment anything below. So thanks to those who are doing that as well, keeping us busy in the YouTube comments section this week also. Appreciate you guys and the time all the way around. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.